Today, I want to take you on a journey of heartbreak, resilience, and a love that blooms against all odds. It begins with Lena, a young woman trapped in the shadows of false accusations and family betrayal, whose husband, blinded by jealousy, left her tied to a tree in the cold darkness of night. Alone, scared, and facing dangers she never imagined, Lena's fate seemed sealed until Kai, a quiet man carrying the weight of his own sorrows, crossed her path. What happened next would not only test their strength, but also ignite a connection so profound it would change their lives forever. Let us step into their story. The desert night did not forgive weakness. Cold winds scraped across the hardpan, whispering through the creosote and cottonwoods like a warning too ancient to ignore. Beneath one of those trees, where its trunk split into two pale limbs, Lena Marrow hung by her arms, wrists twisted behind her and bound with coarse rope. Every breath pulled splinters of bark against her back. Her feet were bare. Her dress, once blue as morning, hung in torn strips around her legs. A thin line of dried blood traced down from her cheek to her jaw. She didn't feel it anymore. She hardly felt her hands either. The rope had stolen all sensation hours ago, but she still felt the words. Cruel words always outlast pain. "You shamed this family," her husband had hissed, his voice shaking more from his mother's poison than from certainty. "You've been laughing too freely, accepting gifts from men who ride by. They all talk about you, Lena." None of it true. But truth had never mattered to Marlon, not when his mother fed him lies with the same ease she ladled soup into a bowl. The old widow had never wanted Lena in the first place. Too quiet, she'd said. Quiet women hide sins. And so she had whispered, drip by drip, until her son saw shadows in every gesture Lena made. Until the night he came home from the freight route smelling of sweat and suspicion. Until he raised his hand. Until he dragged her through the yard while his mother watched from the porch with satisfaction pinched across her face. And then, this. A tree. A rope. A woman left for the coyotes to decide whether she deserved dawn. Lena bit down hard, holding back a cry as a sharp jolt tore through her shoulders. She tried shifting her weight, but every movement only cinched the rope deeper. The ache in her arms had grown into something hollow, something she feared might swallow her entirely if she let it. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote yipped, a thin, eerie sound carried on the wind. Another answered, closer. Her stomach clenched. Would they come tonight? Or was she meant to die slower in shame and silence? She let her head droop. Her hair fell across her face like a curtain she was grateful for. Darkness hummed around her, steady and indifferent. The moon had not yet risen, but the cold made itself known, biting into her skin. Seconds, minutes, she couldn't tell, passed before a soft crunch in the underbrush made her breath hitch. Not a coyote, not a deer, too steady. Too human. Her heart slammed painfully against her ribs. A shadow stepped between two junipers, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the certainty of someone who belonged to the land far more than any man who claimed to own it. He stopped a few paces away. The moon, just cresting the mesas, spilled silver over his features, dark hair braided down his back, a heavy blanket slung over one arm and a worn knife strapped to his belt. His face was angular, strong, weathered by wind and sun, but his eyes, they were the part that held her breath captive, deep, dark, and steady. They flickered over the rope, the bruises, the dried blood. He raised one hand slowly, palm outward, a gesture, not of threat, of calm. Lena's throat tightened. Fear tried to rise, but exhaustion held it back. He approached with measured steps and stopped close enough that she could see the fine scars tracing his knuckles. He studied the knot with a frown, then glanced at her. "You're hurt," he said quietly. His voice was rough, not from anger but from disuse. Each word felt deliberate, softened by an accent she could not place. Lena tried to speak, but her voice rasped. "My husband." Something dark, anger or sorrow, she couldn't tell, crossed the stranger's eyes. He didn't ask more. Instead, he stepped behind her, lifted his knife and slid its flat side under the rope. He moved slowly, carefully, as though unwilling to startle her. The blade pressed, a twist, a dull snap. The rope gave way. Her arms fell, limp and useless, and she collapsed forward with a gasp. The stranger didn't reach for her immediately. He let her find her own breath. Only when her knees buckled did he catch her gently, one arm bracing her ribs. "You're safe now," he murmured. Safe. She hadn't heard that word in years. He wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and scanned the darkened desert with sharp, watchful eyes. "Can you walk?" he asked. Lena swallowed. "Not far." "I won't take you far," he said. "Only somewhere the night cannot touch you." And without waiting for her fear to speak again, he lifted her, carefully, respectfully, holding her as though she were a story he refused to let end this way. That moment, the first step he took away from the tree where she had been left to die, became the night her life split in two, before the rope, and after the stranger arrived. His name, she would learn, was Kai. But not tonight. Tonight, he simply carried her through the darkness, toward a dawn she had never expected to see. Kai carried Lena through the darkness with the steadiness of someone trained by years of solitude. His arms did not tremble. His breath did not quicken. The desert, harsh and unforgiving to anyone who doubted their steps, seemed to bend around him like an old companion clearing its path. Lena felt the rhythm of his stride, slow, deliberate, each foot placed as though he walked a world she could not yet read. Crickets hummed their brittle music in the grass. Somewhere far off, an owl glided across the night, silent as thought. Lena let her head rest against Kai's shoulder, too weak to hold it up. She didn't know how long he walked. The world drifted in and out in waves of faintness, stars spinning, then darkness, then the scent of sage carried on wind. Once, she heard him pause. His breath stilled, his body tensed. But after a moment, he moved again, carrying her forward without a word. At last, he slowed. Lena forced her eyes open. They stood before a sandstone ledge, its belly carved into a shallow overhang by centuries of wind. Beneath it crouched a small shelter, a frame of willow branches plastered with clay, its roof reinforced with flat stones gathered from the ridge. Smoke curled faintly from a narrow hole cut in the roof. Kai shifted her weight and ducked through the low doorway. The interior glowed softly with the ember orange of a banked fire. The air smelled of juniper and earth. A single woven blanket lay on a bed of cedar boughs, arranged neatly against the far wall. He lowered her gently onto the blanket, his movements precise, as though afraid she might shatter. When she winced, he paused. "Pain?" he asked. She nodded, embarrassed at her own weakness. Kai crouched by the fire, added a piece of wood and watched the flames catch. Only then did he look at her fully. His gaze was steady, questioning but not accusing, concern, but without pity's sting. "I'll clean your wounds," he said. He took a small gourd from a shelf carved into the clay wall and poured water into a carved wooden bowl. He warmed it beside the fire, then returned to her side. Lena tried to sit up on her own, but her shoulders burned too fiercely. Kai slipped an arm behind her carefully and eased her upright. "Tell me if it's too much," he said. When the cloth touched her wrists, stinging sharply, she clenched her teeth. "Sorry," he murmured. "You're not hurting me," she whispered. Not like he did. Kai's hand stilled. A shadow crossed his features. Anger not at her, but for her. He dipped the cloth again, cleaned each raw line of rope burn with gentle, unhurried movements, and then reached for a small pouch hanging from a wooden peg. Herbs, he explained. They will help. He crushed the leaves between his fingers, mixed them with warm water, and pressed the paste onto her wounds. It smelled sharp, like crushed pine and bitter earth. When he finished, he tore a strip from an old linen shirt folded near the fire and wrapped her wrists with careful precision, binding them layer by layer until the trembling in her arms eased. Lena exhaled shakily. "Thank you." He nodded once, not dismissive, simply accepting the thanks as something shared between them. Kai sat back on his heels. "Rest now. The night is long still." Lena shook her head. "If he comes back, Marlin, he'll be angry I'm gone." "He won't find this place," Kai said quietly, "and if he wanders close, I'll hear him." He said it without boast or threat, just truth carved from stone. Lena stared into the fire, her mind drifting like smoke. The flicker of flames cast soft shadows over Kai's face, revealing the lines of a man who had carried his own weight of grief. His eyes carried storms he never spoke of, his jaw set in a way that made her wonder how much he had survived alone. "Why did you help me?" Lena asked finally. Kai didn't look at her. His gaze remained fixed on the fire. "A person left bound in the dark is no enemy of mine," he said, "and no one deserves to face the night that way." For a moment, neither spoke. Silence filled the shelter, heavy, but not suffocating. Just the hush of two stories not yet told. Kai stood then and moved to the doorway. He sat cross-legged just outside, knife across his lap, his back to her so he could watch the desert. "You'll sleep," he said softly. "I'll keep watch." The wind shifted outside, carrying the smell of distant rain. Lena lay down slowly, pulling the blanket to her chin. Her wrists throbbed, but her heart, long bruised by fear, felt, for the first time in years, something like safety unfurling inside her. Her eyes closed. The fire whispered. The desert exhaled. And Kai kept vigil beneath the starlight, unmoving, listening for anything that might steal her dawn. Lena woke to the soft crackle of a growing fire and the faint, resin-sweet scent of juniper burning low. For a moment she didn't know where she was. The ceiling above her wasn't her husband's house. The walls weren't thin enough for her mother-in-law's voice to slip through like a knife. She blinked. The willow branches overhead came into focus. Clay walls. The hush of a shelter built by hands that cared more for survival than show. Then the memories flooded back. The rope, the tree, the cold night, Kai's arms lifting her from the darkness. She pushed herself slowly upright, wincing at the stiff ache along her shoulders. Her wrists throbbed beneath the linen bandages, but the sharp edge of pain had softened into something bearable. Kai sat near the doorway, his silhouette framed by early morning light. His braid rested over one shoulder, dark as wet earth. The knife still lay across his knees, though his posture eased slightly when he noticed she was awake. "You rested," he said. Not a question, an observation. Lena nodded. "Did you sleep at all?" "A little," he replied. "The land is quieter here." She didn't know what that meant entirely, but she sensed truth in it. Some people spoke as though they'd swallowed the wind. Kai was one of them. He rose and crossed to her with a small wooden cup. "Drink?" The water was cool, tasting faintly of minerals and roots. Lena drank slowly, each swallow soothing the gravel-like dryness in her throat. When she handed the cup back, Kai studied her face with a kind of measuring calm. "You're stronger than last night," he said. She found herself flushing, though she wasn't sure why. "I don't feel strong." His eyes softened. Strength isn't how hard you hit, it's how long you endure. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever looked at her like she wasn't a burden to be carried or corrected. Her gaze drifted toward the shelter's entrance. Beyond it, the desert morning glowed gold. A narrow ribbon of water shimmered between willows and reeds. A finch hopped among the stones, tilting its head as if listening to its own heartbeat. Lena had not woken to peace in a very, very long time. Kai crouched near the fire and stirred a small pot. You need food. Your body has taken harm. Lena lifted her hand instinctively to help, but the moment she flexed her wrists, a wince betrayed her. Kai's eyes flicked to the movement. Not yet, he said softly. Let your wounds rest. After a moment's hesitation, she lowered her hands. He offered her a wooden bowl with warm porridge, thickened with crushed nuts and something sweet, mesquite maybe. She took a tentative bite and felt her stomach tighten painfully, as though unused to kindness. She slowed her chewing, letting her body remember how nourishment felt. Kai ate little. He seemed the kind of man who rationed himself without complaint, giving to others before taking for himself. When she finished, she set the bowl aside. Thank you. He merely nodded again, but in that small gesture was a kind of humility she wasn't used to. Men she'd known always made their goodness a spectacle. Kai carried his quietly, almost reluctantly, as if unsure he deserved any measure of gratitude. She shifted and leaned her back against the clay wall, letting its coolness seep into her skin. Do you live here alone? Yes. For how long? He hesitated, then answered, Many years. She wanted to ask why, but sensed that question was a door he wasn't ready to open. Not yet. Instead, she tried another. Were you out there by chance last night? Or did you find me on purpose? Kai stirred the dying coals with a stick. I heard a woman crying, or trying not to. Her breath caught. I followed the sound, he added simply. Lena stared into the fire, her heartbeat quickening. She had tried so hard not to cry, one sharp gasp only, bitten back out of stubbornness. And still he'd heard her across the night. You must have good ears, she murmured. He shrugged lightly. The desert speaks if you listen. A long silence stretched between them, gentle, not tight. Lena watched him add another stick to the fire. His movements quiet and practiced. She couldn't help noticing how his presence filled the small shelter without crowding it. He took up space, but never too much. She drew a breath. I don't know what to do now. Kai didn't look at her, but his voice carried certainty. First, you heal. And after? You decide where your path leads. He paused, then added, You choose, not them. Them, Marlin, his mother, the whispers. Lena lowered her gaze, fighting the sudden sting of tears. Her voice shook when she answered, No one has ever told me that before. Kai's jaw tightened slightly, as if the idea offended him. You're not owned, he said. Her breath trembled. She looked down at her bandaged wrists, still raw but no longer bound. For the first time, those wounds felt like something other than shame. They felt like the beginning of a door opening. Outside, the sun crept higher, spilling warm gold across the sand. A new day stretched before her, unfamiliar and frightening and full of possibility. Kai rose and extended his hand, not demanding, simply offering. Come, he said. You need to wash. The water will help the pain. Lena hesitated only a heartbeat before placing her hand in his. His grip was warm, steady, alive. For the first time in her life, she felt the world shift, not violently, not brutally, but gently, as though turning toward her instead of away. The walk to the water was slow, not because the distance was far, but because Lena's body felt stitched together with aches. Every step tugged at bruises blooming across her ribs, but Kai adjusted his pace without her needing to ask. He walked beside her, close enough to steady her if she stumbled, yet far enough that she didn't feel trapped. Morning light warmed the sand. The air smelled of damp earth and sun-touched leaves. Lena had forgotten the desert could feel gentle. When they reached the narrow stream, Kai stopped. The water ran clear over smooth stones, carrying slivers of the sky in its ripples. He pointed to a flat rock near the bank. "Sit. The cold will numb the pain." Lena eased herself down, curling her toes into the cool sand. Kai crouched by the water and dipped his hand in. The surface trembled, reflecting his face like a half-formed memory. He filled a small clay bowl, then returned to her. "Give me your wrists," he said softly. Lena hesitated, not because she didn't trust him, but because the gesture felt intimate in a way her marriage never had. Marlon had taken her wrists 100 times, always in accusation, in anger, in ownership. So her muscles flinched automatically, even as her mind whispered that Kai was nothing like him. Kai noticed the flinch. He didn't move closer. "You can do it yourself if you want," he offered. The way he said it, without disappointment, without pressure, softened something inside her. She extended her arms slowly. Kai cupped water over her bandages, letting it soak through gently before peeling the linen away. The cloth came off sticky with dried herbal paste. Her skin underneath was an angry map of red and purple, swollen in places. His jaw tightened, not in judgment, in sadness. "Did he do this often?" he asked quietly. Lena looked away. "Not always like this. Usually just words. But words can bruise too." Kai dipped the bowl again and let the water flow over her wrists. The cold made her teeth clench, but it soothed the fire beneath her skin. "He had no right," Kai murmured. Something about his voice, low, steady, threaded with certainty, made tears rise unexpectedly. She blinked them away, ashamed. Kai saw, but instead of pity, he offered space. "Cry if you need to," he said. "No one will hear but the water." The kindness undid her. A small sob shook her, then another. She covered her mouth with her free hand, trying to muffle the sound. Tears slipped down her cheeks, splashing into the stream below. Kai didn't touch her, didn't move. He simply knelt beside her, letting her fall apart without fear of consequence. When the sobs finally slowed, Lena wiped her face with trembling fingers. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Why?" Kai asked. "I don't know." She swallowed. "I think I've spent too long apologizing for things I didn't cause." Kai set the bowl aside. "Then stop. You survived cruelty. That's not something you ever apologize for." Lena looked at him then. Really looked. He spoke as someone who knew survival well. The sun rose higher, warming her skin. The water lapped softly against stone. For a moment, the world felt still, suspended between the life she had fled and the life she had not yet chosen. Kai began gathering smooth stones from the water's edge, placing them in a small pile. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Making a poultice. These hold coolness longer than cloth. They will keep the swelling down." He glanced at her. "Unless you'd prefer I don't." She shook her head. "I trust you." Something flickered in his eyes. Something warm, something almost startled, before he masked it again with quiet focus. He wrapped the stones in damp cloth and bound them loosely around her wrists. The pressure was gentle, cooling the throbbing pulse beneath her skin. "You should stay here a few days," Kai said. "Your body needs time." Lena looked toward the distant ridge, where the world she'd left waited like a threat. "If Marlon realizes I'm alive," Kai's voice remained calm, "he won't find you, and if he tries, he won't get past me." Not a boast, a promise carved in granite. Lena's breath shivered. She didn't want violence. She didn't want anyone hurt because of her. Yet Kai spoke with such quiet conviction that for the first time, the fear in her chest loosened its grip. "Why are you helping me?" she asked again, softer this time. Kai paused, hand resting on the stones. His eyes met hers, dark and clear. "Because once," he said, "someone saved me when I thought my life was over. I didn't understand it then, but I do now." Lena waited. Kai added, "Kindness given becomes a debt we pay forward." The words settled deep in her, warming the places that cold nights had hollowed out. She didn't know what her future held. She didn't know if she would ever be whole again. But sitting beside the stream, wrapped in sunlight and silence, she felt something unexpected rise inside her. Hope. Small, tender, but alive. Kai stood and offered his hand again. "Come," he said. "You should rest." This time, she took his hand without hesitation. The desert wind whispered through the reeds as they walked back together. Two wounded lives beginning, quietly, to intertwine. The days that followed settled into a rhythm Lena had never known. Slow, gentle, and strangely safe. For the first time in years, she did not wake to shouted orders or sharp eyes watching her every breath. She woke to sunlight warming the clay walls, to the soft sound of Kai grinding herbs or stirring the fire, to quiet, real, peaceful quiet. Her wrists healed little by little. The swelling eased, the raw skin softened, and the purple bruises yellowed around the edges. Kai changed the poultices each morning with the same patience he had shown the night he rescued her. He never rushed, he never scolded, he never touched her without warning. On the third morning, when she winced lifting the gourd of water, Kai simply slid it closer without a word. By the fourth day, Lena could walk to the stream without needing his arm. Kai watched from a distance, letting her reclaim small pieces of herself without hovering. She appreciated that more than she could say. The desert around them began to feel like a world apart, one where the past couldn't reach her. The overhang above their shelter shielded them from harsh sun. The stream offered water and solace. A stand of tall willows whispered in the wind like old women trading secrets. Lizards darted across warm rocks, tails flicking sharply. Even the birds seemed to accept her presence, hopping closer each day as though testing her sincerity. One afternoon, as Lena sat near the shelter weaving thin reeds into a simple mat, Kai returned from checking the ridge trail. His steps were quieter than the rustling branches. "Wind's changing," he said. "Storm might come tonight." Lena looked up. He gestured to the horizon, where a darker smear of cloud pressed against the blue. "The kind that brings cold rain. You'll stay inside." "Will it be dangerous?" she asked. "No," Kai answered. "Just noisy." He set down a bundle of dry juniper branches beside the fire pit. Lena noticed something about his walk, slight stiffness, a subtle hesitation as he lowered the branches. "You're hurt," she said, without thinking. Kai blinked, startled. "I'm fine." But the way he shifted his weight told another story. Lena rose carefully and stepped toward him. "May I see?" For a moment he didn't move. His eyes, dark as storm-soaked earth, studied her face. She wondered if anyone had ever offered him concern before, or if he had grown so used to carrying his burdens alone that even kindness felt foreign. Slowly, he nodded. He rolled up his sleeve just enough to reveal a gash along his upper arm, crusted with dried blood. It wasn't deep, but looked painful. "How did this happen?" Lena asked, heart tightening. "Branches. On the ridge," he shrugged. "Carelessness." Lena shook her head. "Sit." Kai hesitated. She softened her voice. "You've helped me. Let me help you." He sat. Lena fetched the herbs he'd used on her wrists. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the strange intimacy of tending someone who had saved her life. She dipped the cloth in water, rinsed the wound, and applied the paste with as much gentleness as she could. Kai didn't flinch, but his breath tightened, barely noticeable. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "A little," he admitted. She wrapped the linen around his arm, tying a careful knot. "There." Kai examined the bandage, then her hands. "You did well." The praise, simple as it was, warmed her chest. Her life had been one long battle to avoid criticism. Words of kindness felt like rare treasures. They sat in silence for a moment, the growing wind brushing through the trees. Kai spoke first. "Your hands are steady." Lena gave a small laugh. "Inside, I'm shaking." He turned toward her slightly. "You've been through more than anyone should. It will take time for your body to remember peace." Peace. She savored the word quietly. The wind deepened, carrying the scent of approaching rain. The sky dimmed a fraction. Kai stood and secured the shelter's woven curtain over the doorway. "I'll keep watch when the storm comes," he said. "You don't have to protect me every moment," she replied softly. His eyes held hers. "I want to." Her heart stumbled in her chest. She looked away quickly, unsure how to hold the weight of those words. As evening drew near, thunder rumbled across the desert. Kai brought the fire inside, building it low but warm. The shelter filled with orange glow and the soft crackle of burning wood. Lena sat near the flames, feeling their warmth kiss her skin. Kai settled across from her, sharpening a small stone knife with slow, methodical motions. When the first drops of rain struck the roof, Lena flinched. Lightning cracked. Thunder followed like a rolling drum. The wind moaned against the stone ledge. Without thinking, she wrapped her arms around herself. Kai noticed instantly. "It won't harm us," he said gently. "The ledge protects this place." She nodded but couldn't stop her trembling. Storms had always meant shouting, broken things, and hiding in corners. Kai set his knife aside and moved a little closer, not touching, just closer. "Listen," he said softly. "The rain is only water. It sings before it sleeps." Lena closed her eyes. He was right. The storm song was powerful, but not cruel. Slowly, her breathing steadied. Kai watched her, not with pity, but with a patient kind of understanding she had never known. Outside, the desert storm roared. Inside, for the first time, Lena wasn't afraid. The storm lasted long into the night, rumbling across the desert like a restless spirit unwilling to settle. Rain hammered the stone ledge overhead, rolling off in silver sheets. The shelter glowed softly, its fire crackling in steady rhythms that grounded the chaos outside. Lena sat beside the warmth, her legs tucked close, watching the flames dance. Kai remained near the doorway, listening to the wind the way others listened to conversations. He seemed to understand its moods instinctively, when it threatened, when it warned, when it merely grumbled like an old man annoyed at the world. Sometime past midnight, the storm softened. The rain turned to a light pattering, like fingertips brushing the earth. Kai shifted closer to the fire, laying his knife aside. "You're not afraid anymore," he said quietly. Lena startled slightly. "How do you know?" "You're breathing differently." He pointed gently to his own chest. "Fear tightens here. Yours is soft now." She hadn't realized how much attention he paid to such things. "I didn't mean to worry you." "You didn't," he said. "I just wanted you to know you're safe." Those words, spoken without hesitation, settled deep inside her, warmer than the fire. Silence stretched, but it wasn't heavy. It felt like shared air, shared quiet. The kind of silence that asked nothing of her. Lena turned her gaze to the doorway, where rain sparkled in droplets along the willow curtain. The scent of wet stone filled the shelter. "It's strange," she whispered. "I feel like I've lived two lives, one before the tree and one after you cut the rope." Kai didn't react dramatically or lean in closer the way men in stories sometimes did. He just tilted his head slightly. "And which life feels more like you?" "I don't know yet," Lena admitted. "But this place, it feels like breathing without pain." Kai nodded slowly. "The land gives that, when we let it." "You talk like it's a person," she said, offering a faint smile. "It is," he replied simply. "Everything alive is a teacher. The stream, the stones, the wind." He looked at her. "And people too." "What have people taught you?" she asked gently. He hesitated, long enough that she wondered if she'd asked something too personal. But then his voice softened. "That trust is fragile." His eyes darkened, shadows passing across them like clouds. "And losing it costs more than we realize." Lena didn't push. She sensed that his stories were held in old scars, not ready to be opened all at once. But she also sensed he wasn't hiding from her, just protecting spaces inside himself the way she protected her heartbreak. "Maybe one day," he said, "I'll tell you more." Lena nodded. "I'd like that." Another rumble of thunder growled in the distance, gentler this time, almost like a sigh. Kai shifted, sitting cross-legged beside the fire. His presence, steady and grounded, filled the small shelter like a warmth that didn't need flames. "You should sleep," he said. "The storm is nearly done." Lena didn't lie. "I'm afraid of falling asleep." He tilted his head. "Why?" "Because waking up has always meant something bad waiting, a voice yelling, a punishment, a demand." Her fingers twisted in the blanket on her lap. "Sleep never felt safe." Kai considered her for a long moment. Then, in a tone soft enough it barely reached her, he said, "Then don't sleep alone tonight." Her breath caught, but he raised a hand quickly, clarifying with gentle certainty, "I'll stay by the doorway, just so you know you're not alone, and no one will come for you." The tension in her chest loosened like a knot pulled free. She nodded. "Thank you. Truly." Kai stood and moved to the doorway, sitting with his back against the clay wall, his silhouette outlined by the dim glow of dying fire. Lena curled onto her side, pulling the blanket to her chin. The storm's final whispers drifted across the desert roof. Water dripped rhythmically from the rocks above, each drop a small heartbeat of calm. The fire dimmed, the shadows stretched, and sleep finally crept over her, not like a thief, but like a soft touch. At some point deep in the night, Lena stirred. Opening her eyes slightly, she found Kai still sitting exactly where he promised, awake, watching the refuge around them with a protector's stillness. And in that quiet moment, half dream, half waking, she realized something startling. For the first time in her life, she wanted someone to stay. Not out of fear, but gratitude. Not from dread, but hope. She drifted back to sleep with a peacefulness she never thought she'd earn. Outside, the storm faded into memory. Inside, something new took root. Small, fragile, but fiercely alive. Morning came quietly, washing the canyon walls in soft gold. The storm had rinsed the desert clean, leaving the air cool and sweet with the scent of wet sage. Birds hopped between the willows, shaking droplets from their wings. The world felt new, as if the night had pressed a reset on everything weary. Lena stepped from the shelter, stretching stiff muscles, her bare feet sinking into damp earth. She felt lighter than she had in years. The sleep she'd feared had embraced her gently, not with nightmares, but with the warmth of knowing she wasn't alone. Kai stood at the spring, refilling the water skin. His hair hung loose down his back, the braid undone from the storm. Morning light softened the edges of his stern features, revealing a quiet tiredness. He had not slept at all. "You stayed awake all night," Lena said, walking toward him. He straightened, nodding once. "Storms make the land restless. I listen, just in case." She watched him for a moment. "You listen to everything. It's how I learned to survive." The simplicity of his words struck her. Lena had survived by shrinking. Kai had survived by listening, both marked by their pasts, yet slowly untangling them here. While she cleaned the shelter and rekindled the fire, Kai gathered fallen branches washed down by the storm. They worked without need of constant conversation, moving in a rhythm that had become natural, like two halves of a task shaped for four hands. Later she cooked corn mush over the coals, adding a pinch of sage for flavor. Kai sat nearby, carving a smooth curve into a piece of cedar. She recognized the shape developing under his knife, a ladle. "For me?" she asked softly. He paused, then nodded. "You cook here. You should have things that are yours." The words pressed warmth behind her ribs. She brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "I've never had anything that truly felt like mine." Kai didn't comment. Instead, he set the carved ladle beside her gently, as though gifting something fragile. They ate in quiet peace. For the first time, Lena didn't feel like she was taking space. She felt like she belonged in it. When the sun climbed higher, Kai wiped his hands on a cloth and said, "We should walk the ridge. Make sure the storm didn't break any trails." She hesitated. "You mean together?" He nodded. "The ground is soft, easy to fall. Better with two." "All right," she said, heart warming. The climb was slow. The path wound upward between sandstone boulders, the earth still slick from rain. Every few steps, Kai paused to check the soil, the prints, the shifting rocks. Lena watched him, fascinated by the reverence he held for the land, as if it were an old friend speaking in a language only he could hear. At the ridge, the view opened wide. Below them, a vast stretch of desert shimmered under the sun, dotted with juniper and mesquite. Water glimmered in the wash like a silver thread weaving through the earth. "It's beautiful," Lena whispered. Kai nodded. "This land saved my life many times." She turned to him. "And now it's saving mine." He looked at her then, really looked, and something softened in his expression. Not pity, not duty. Something quieter, deeper. "Lena," he said, "the night I found you, I saw someone who still had fire inside her. Even when hurt, even when tied to that tree. I followed that fire." Her breath caught. "Fire?" "I felt like nothing." "You were alive," he said simply, "and strong enough to stay alive. That is something." She swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "No one's ever spoken about me like that." He turned toward the open world again. "People forget strength when they only look at pain." Lena blinked against the sting in her eyes. The wind swept gently over the ridge, lifting her hair. Standing beside him, she felt something shifting inside her, like a door that had been nailed shut for years finally being pushed open. On the way back down, she slipped in the damp clay. Before panic could even rise, Kai caught her by the elbow, holding her steady. His grip was firm, grounding, not possessive. "You're all right," he murmured. Her pulse fluttered. "Thank you." His hand lingered for the barest moment before he released her. But the warmth of it stayed long after. By the time they reached the shelter again, shadows stretched long across the canyon floor. Lena knelt beside the fire, rekindling it, her heart still thudding with more than exertion. Kai sat at the doorway, repairing the straps of a saddlebag. The quiet between them had changed. Something unspoken hummed beneath it. After a long while, Lena whispered, Kai, you don't always have to keep watch alone. He looked up surprised. I'm learning to be brave, she said softly. Maybe we can learn things together. The canyon held its breath. Kai's expression shifted, something fragile, almost hopeful, flickering like a candle in wind. Yes, he said, maybe we can. Outside, the desert glowed with the last light of day, and somewhere in that soft golden glow, a new beginning quietly took root. Autumn seeped slowly into the canyon over the next weeks. The air cooled, the shadows lengthened, and the cottonwoods turned pale gold, leaves fluttering like small notes of farewell each time the wind passed through them. For Lena, each day felt like stitching a torn life back together, slow, imperfect, but finally her own. She and Kai worked side by side as naturally as the sun and the horizon. She cooked while he built. She gathered herbs while he hunted. When he taught her how to track rabbits by the crescent shape of their paw prints, she laughed every time she mistook them for tiny birds. When she read aloud from her old Bible at night, he listened with a stillness that made her voice feel powerful, not meek. Sometimes, when she woke in the early morning, Kai would already be outside, watching the sunrise. He never said why, but she sensed he was learning how to live again, just as she was. One crisp morning, Lena was grinding dried corn on a flat stone when Kai returned from his traps. He carried a rabbit in one hand, but his eyes were fixed on the ground. Something wrong? She asked. He crouched beside the fire ring, his expression heavy. Footprints, he said. Fresh ones. Her breath hitched. Animal? He shook his head. Man. One horse. One rider. Her heart pounded painfully. Are you sure? Kai's jaw tightened. Yes. Fear slid cold into Lena's veins. There were not many who rode this far into the canyon. Fewer still who had reason to search for her. What direction? She whispered. Kai motioned toward the trail leading down from the ridge. He rode past, heading north. But his tracks circled once, as if he was searching. Lena pressed a trembling hand to her chest. It's him. It must be. Kai didn't deny it. He rose slowly, scanning the horizon with sharp, knowing eyes. He will return. Lena stared at the ground. The peace she had forged in this small shelter suddenly felt fragile, like a clay pot someone could smash with one careless kick. Kai knelt in front of her, forcing her to meet his gaze. Listen to me, he said firmly. You are not the woman he tried to break. You are not the woman who bowed her head. You are Lena, strong enough to speak truth to a whole town. She swallowed. But I don't want him near us. Kai nodded once. He won't hurt you. Not here. Not with me. Her breathing steadied, not because the fear vanished, but because she trusted him more than she trusted the ground beneath her feet. That evening, they sat by the fire with tension winding between them like taut rope. The silence wasn't peaceful this time. It crackled with unspoken fear, unspoken worry, unspoken something else. Tell me about your wife, Lena said softly, surprising even herself. Kai's carving knife paused mid-stroke, his eyes lowered. For a moment, she thought he might refuse, but then he exhaled slowly. She was gentle, he began. Her hands always smelled of sage. She wanted a garden, even in the dry months. His voice cracked faintly. I left her for 3 days. 3. And in those 3 days the child came early. Lena reached out but stopped herself just before touching him. Kai continued in a whisper. When I came back, there was only silence in our home. Silence where there should have been crying or singing. His throat worked. Since then, I kept myself apart, so I would never break anyone's world again. Her eyes stung. You didn't break mine. He looked up sharply. Not yet. You won't, she whispered. You saved me. He stared at her as though her words were more dangerous than her husband's threats. Slowly, he set the knife aside. "You speak like the land after rain," he murmured. Soft, but changing everything. Lena felt heat rise in her cheeks. His gaze held hers, a moment longer than it ever had before. Steady, searching, almost tender. But as the firelight flickered, something outside the shelter cracked like a snapped branch. Kai was on his feet instantly, hand on his knife. Lena froze. "What was that?" she whispered. Kai motioned for silence. He stepped lightly to the doorway, listening. The desert had gone unnervingly still. Footsteps, very faint, very real. Her pulse hammered. He returned to her side, voice low and steady. "Pack your blanket, quietly." Lena fumbled with trembling fingers. "Is it?" "I don't know yet," he said. "But no one walks this canyon at night unless they mean harm." Her heartbeat roared in her ears. Kai drew closer, his breath warm against her temple. "Stay behind me. And remember, whatever comes, you're not alone." The desert wind hissed against the shelter walls. Someone was out there. And for the first time since she escaped her husband's cruelty, the world that had begun to feel safe shifted back into danger. But Lena was no longer the woman tied to a tree, and beside her was a man who had sworn silently but fiercely that she would never face her monsters alone again. The night was thick with shadows and the smell of sage. Lena clutched her blanket, knees drawn to her chest, while Kai's figure cut a steady silhouette by the doorway. Every tiny sound, wind rustling through the canyon, the creak of a branch, the soft shuffle of his boots, felt amplified, threatening to shatter the fragile calm they had built together. Minutes stretched into hours. The desert, normally a quiet refuge, now seemed like a predator circling its prey. Lena's teeth chattered, not from cold, but from the pulse of fear hammering in her chest. Kai knelt beside her, whispering, "You remember the path back, don't you? If we need to run, follow me." Her fingers tightened around his. "I don't want to run," she said, voice trembling. "I can't, not this time." Kai's eyes softened. "Then we face it. Together." A rustling from the ridge cut through their fragile calm. Lena's heart leaped into her throat. Kai moved to the entrance, one hand on the hilt of his knife, the other gesturing for her to stay behind. "Show yourself," Kai called, voice low but firm. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall, familiar. Her husband. Lena's stomach lurched. His eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the shelter as though it belonged to him. "Lena," he said, voice smooth, almost taunting. "You really thought you could hide from me?" Her knees shook, but she held her ground. Kai stepped forward, body shielding her. "You leave now," he said. "You'll get nothing from her." Her husband's lips curved into a smirk. "Oh, I already know who got nothing, and who got away. But I'll take back what's mine." Lena's breath caught. You have no right." "Right?" he echoed. "The law may not care, but I do." His gaze flicked to Kai. "And you? Don't think you can stop me." Kai's jaw tightened. "Try me." The air thickened, tension straining each second until it felt like the canyon itself was holding its breath. Lena, for the first time, felt a surge of strength. Fear still twisted her gut, but so did something sharper. Anger, defiance, determination. "No," she said, voice firm, echoing in the canyon. "You do not get to touch me again. You do not get to ruin anyone's life, not mine, not anyone's." Her husband laughed harshly, but there was a pause this time, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Lena stepped forward past Kai's protective stance, her head high. "I am not your victim. I am not what you left behind. I am not yours to claim. The words hit harder than any punch, reverberating in the canyon like a storm's thunder. For a moment, silence fell. Kai put a steady hand on her shoulder, grounding her, yet allowing her to shine in her own courage. Her husband faltered, as if seeing her not as a scared woman, but as someone who had reclaimed her own life. "You're finished here," Kai said, voice calm but absolute. Her husband's smirk dissolved into a scowl. He glanced around the canyon, realizing the isolation, the strength they had. His hands twitched, but he stepped back, calculating. "This isn't over," he spat before mounting his horse. Lena's chest heaved. The horse's hooves clattered against the canyon floor, fading into the distance. She sank to the ground, trembling, exhausted, but not broken. Kai knelt beside her, holding her close. "It's over," he whispered. "For now. You're safe." Lena let the tears come, hot and messy, and for the first time she didn't fight them. They washed away the last remnants of fear and pain, leaving something new in their place. Hope. She looked at Kai, voice small but sure. "Thank you. For everything." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "No," he said softly. "You did this. You stood tall. You're the one who fought. I only stood beside you." A soft wind stirred through the cottonwoods. Lena felt it like a sigh from the earth itself, a reassurance that the storm had passed. She realized then that this canyon, the place that had once felt like a prison, had become her sanctuary. And for the first time, she felt fully alive. That night, they sat together under the stars, fire crackling beside them. There were no more shadows in the canyon, only the gentle warmth of survival, the quiet of freedom, and the shared heartbeat of two souls who had found each other in the wilderness. "Do you think we can really start over?" Lena asked, voice trembling with a mix of hope and disbelief. Kai took her hand. "We've already started. Every sunrise is ours now." And for the first time, Lena allowed herself to believe it. The canyon held no chains, no fear, only promise. And as she leaned against Kai, watching the flames flicker and the stars wheel overhead, she felt something she hadn't known in years: peace, and a love that had endured the storm. The world outside may have been cruel, unpredictable, and harsh, but here, together, they could be whole. The night passed in quiet comfort, carrying with it the unspoken truth that no shadow, no threat, no past could ever take away the courage, the hope, and the love that now bound them. And for the first time, Lena allowed herself to imagine the future, not as a place of fear, but as a canvas, blank and waiting for the colors of joy, laughter, and freedom. The first light of morning spilled over the canyon like a golden promise. Dew sparkled on the desert brush, and the soft chirping of birds filled the quiet space where tension had once hung thick. Lena sat beside Kai, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of smoke and hope. Her fingers traced patterns in the sand, a small grounding ritual after the storm of the previous night. Kai watched her with a tenderness that made her chest ache in the best way. "You slept," he said softly, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Lena laughed quietly, the sound fragile but real. "A little. It's hard to sleep when your whole life changes overnight." Kai nodded, understanding in his gaze. "You didn't just survive, Lena. You thrived. You faced everything and you didn't let fear win." She met his eyes, and for a moment, words failed her. So much had been taken, so much had been endured, yet here they were, alive, together, and free. A warmth spread in her chest, one that had nothing to do with fire or sun. It was the warmth of being seen, of being valued, of being loved fiercely and without conditions. "Do you ever think about the future?" she asked, voice soft, almost hesitant. Kai took her hand, fingers entwining with hers. All the time, he said, and I don't see it as scary anymore. Not if we walk it together. The canyon, once a place of hiding and fear, now felt like a home. The winds carried a gentle whisper, and Lena imagined it was the earth itself applauding their courage. Every rock, every tree seemed to vibrate with life, and she realized that the scars of the past could exist alongside the joy of the present. The past would always be there. Yes, but it didn't have to define her. Later that day, they began the slow, deliberate work of rebuilding. They scavenged remnants of old structures, repaired broken fences, and even planted a small garden, hands dirty, but hearts full. Each act, simple yet profound, was a statement. Life goes on, and they would shape it together. Neighbors from nearby settlements started to visit, drawn by whispers of the two who had survived the canyon and the man who had tried to take everything from them. There was curiosity, yes, but also admiration. Lena realized she was no longer just surviving for herself. Her courage was inspiring others. She smiled at the thought, a light in her chest that refused to dim. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in hues of rose and amber, Kai pulled her close. "I have something for you," he said, his voice trembling with excitement. Lena raised an eyebrow, curious. Kai handed her a small, rough-hewn box. She opened it to find a simple silver band inside, engraved with tiny stars that mirrored the canyon sky. "I wanted you to have this," Kai said softly, "to remind you that even in the darkest places, there is light, and that light, your light, is unbreakable." Tears welled in Lena's eyes. She laughed, a joyful, unrestrained sound. "It's perfect," she whispered, "just like you." Kai smiled, sliding the ring onto her finger. "Perfect isn't the absence of hardship," he said. "Perfect is the strength to keep going, to keep loving, to keep believing. That's us." They stood there for a long while, hands clasped, hearts beating in unison. The canyon around them seemed to shimmer with the promise of new beginnings. Birds sang their evening songs, and the wind carried a melody of freedom and peace. As night fell, Lena leaned against Kai, feeling the steady warmth of his presence. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," she admitted. "So happy, so safe." Kai kissed her forehead, a gentle seal on all they had endured. "And you always will," he whispered, "because we choose this, every day. We choose each other, and we choose life." The stars above shone brighter than ever, reflecting the quiet triumph in their hearts, and Lena realized, as she looked at the endless sky, that every fear she had faced, every tear shed, every sleepless night had led her to this exact moment, a life reclaimed, a love realized, and a world that suddenly seemed full of endless possibilities. They would face challenges, yes, life always does. But together, they had the strength to overcome anything, and as they sat side by side, the night embracing them in its gentle, eternal hush, Lena whispered a vow to herself and to the universe. "I am free, I am alive, and I am loved." And in that canyon, under the vast, twinkling expanse of the desert sky, their hearts beat together in perfect harmony. The storm had passed, the dawn had come, and the rest of their lives, bright, full, and unforgettable, awaited.